I never thought I'd be left standing in the cold by my own daughter. Never imagined that the man she married would strip me of dignity in my lowest moment, and that she would let him. For 58 years, I carried the belief that unconditional love was real, especially within family. I lived my life around it, around my husband, and around our daughter Amanda. Every meal I cooked, every holiday I planned, every dollar I saved was for them. When cancer took my husband, it felt as if the floor had vanished beneath my feet. But in the dark fog of grief, I clung to one thought: I still had Amanda. I still had my daughter. I sold the house my husband and I had built from scratch in Cedar Park. Too many memories, too many nights waking up expecting to hear his voice calling from the kitchen. Amanda and her husband Chad offered me a place to stay, or at least Amanda did. Chad barely looked up from his phone when I moved in. I tried to make myself small. I stayed in my tiny back room, cooked, cleaned, ran errands, anything to be useful, anything to avoid being a burden. But Chad made sure I felt unwelcome. His eyes carried irritation, as though I were nothing more than a splinter beneath his skin. If I asked a question, he rolled his eyes. If I turned on a show, he'd switch the channel mid-scene. Once as he passed me in the hallway, I heard him mutter a single word under his breath: freeloader. Amanda said nothing. I'd glance at her, begging for just one word of defense, some comfort, but she always brushed it off. He's just stressed. Work's been rough. So I swallowed my shame and stayed quiet. That's what mothers do, isn't it? We hold the pain inside. But that night, everything changed. We sat at the dinner table. I had made chicken pot pie, Chad's favorite. Amanda scrolled on her phone. Chad nursed his beer. The silence was heavy, oppressive. Then Chad looked up, his voice slicing through the air. Maybe it's time we stop pretending this is temporary. We're not a charity. Amanda froze. My fork clattered against the plate. What do you mean? I asked. He smirked, that cruel smirk I'd come to dread. How long is this supposed to go on? You're not working. You're not contributing. We've got bills. We didn't sign up for extra mouths to feed. My breath caught. My heart pounded. I turned to Amanda, desperate, but she wouldn't even meet my eyes. She mumbled softly, maybe it's best if you find something more stable. For everyone's sake. For everyone's sake. I didn't scream. I didn't argue. I walked to my room, packed my things, 2 suitcases, all that was left of a lifetime. No tears came as I zipped them shut. The tears came later when I stood outside their building with the wind cutting through my coat, realizing I had nowhere to go. Amanda didn't walk me out. Chad didn't even bother to pretend. I sat on the curb for an hour, my phone dead in my hand, my heart even deader in my chest. That night I checked into a rundown motel. The wallpaper peeled, the vending machine ate my change, and the air smelled of stale smoke. I lay on the thin mattress, staring at the ceiling, wondering how love could curdle into cruelty. The next morning I sent Amanda a message: I understand. I love you always. She never replied. Weeks turned into months. I tried finding work, but who wants to hire a grieving widow in her late 50s with no recent history? I considered babysitting, cleaning houses. But my body didn't move the way it used to. The loneliness was worse than the hunger, worse than the cold. It was the shame that suffocated me, the knowledge that the daughter I had given everything to could discard me so easily. One evening, sifting through a box of keepsakes, I found my mother's old diary. I don't know why I opened it that night, only that something inside me needed to feel connected to her. I turned the pages, her handwriting looping across the paper. At first it was ordinary weather, grocery prices, little notes. Then came an entry that stopped me cold. Margaret will never know. She must never know. But one day, I pray she understands how much I loved her, even if she was born out of mistake and desire. My breath caught. My heart pounded. I flipped through entry after entry, my hands trembling. Meetings at hotels. Money exchanged in quiet secrecy. A man referred to only by initials, HJS. And then a revelation: arrangements had been made. If anything ever happened to him, he had promised to leave something behind. A trust, a letter, and the name of the lawyer who would know. I stared at the words through tear-blurred eyes. For the first time in months, I felt something other than grief. I felt possibility. Power. A sense that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't finished yet. The diary shook in my hands as though it carried electricity. My mother's words danced on the page, impossible and undeniable at once. A trust. A hidden inheritance. For years, I thought my life had been ordinary. My father, a man who died when I was too young to remember my mother, left to raise me alone. But now her words suggested something far more complicated, a secret buried so deep that even I had been kept from it. The initials, HJS, echoed in my mind as I lay awake that night in the motel. Who was he? A man of influence. Someone married someone who couldn't acknowledge me. Shame and anger twisted together in my chest. Had my entire existence been built on silence and secrets? The next morning, I dressed in my cleanest clothes and took a bus downtown to the address listed in the diary. The building was older, its marble steps worn, but proud, the kind of place where legacies were preserved. I hesitated at the door, feeling like an imposter, a woman with only 2 suitcases to her name, daring to step into a world of mahogany desks and brass plaques. Inside, the receptionist looked up, polite but guarded. "Do you have an appointment?" My throat was dry. "I'm here to ask about a trust." My mother's diary said. My voice faltered, suddenly absurd. But when I gave the name written in the diary, her expression changed. "Please wait here," she said, quickly disappearing down the hallway. Moments later, a man in his 70s emerged. Tall, dignified, with silver hair and sharp eyes that had seen too many secrets. "Mrs. Sullivan's daughter?" he asked quietly, as though even the walls might be listening. "Yes," I whispered. He gestured for me to follow him into his office. The room smelled of leather and paper shelves lined with volumes older than me. He closed the door before speaking. "Your mother swore me to silence, but if you found her writings, I suppose the time has come." He pulled open a drawer and withdrew a sealed envelope yellowed with age. On it, in faded ink, was my name. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was a letter written in a firm, unfamiliar hand, to Margaret. "If you are reading this, then I have failed to do what I should have done in life: acknowledge you. Know that you are my blood, my daughter, and that though circumstances prevented me from being your father in name, you were never far from my thoughts. I have arranged for a portion of my estate to be set aside for you. It is yours by right. Speak with Mr. Whitmore and he will ensure it is delivered." I pressed the letter to my chest, unable to breathe. My father. A man I had never known had left me not only his confession, but something tangible. Mr. Whitmore handed me a folder. "The trust has been accumulating for decades. With investments and interest, the amount is substantial." "How substantial?" I asked, my voice barely steady. He adjusted his glasses. "Nearly $4 million. The room swayed around me. 4 million. After months of being treated as a burden, an extra mouth, I was suddenly staring at freedom written in black ink. Tears welled in my eyes, but this time they weren't from despair. They were from the sudden, dizzying knowledge that I wasn't powerless anymore, that the world Amanda and Chad had forced me into was about to change, and not in the way they expected. For weeks I kept the knowledge to myself, meeting with Mr. Whitmore to finalize paperwork, watching as accounts transferred and signatures confirmed what once felt impossible. The more I learned, the stronger I grew. I wasn't a castaway. I wasn't useless. I was a woman who had survived heartbreak, betrayal, and abandonment, and had been given the chance to rise again. One evening, as I walked past Amanda and Chad's apartment building, my chest tightened. The windows glowed warmly, laughter drifted faintly from inside. To anyone else, it might have looked like an ordinary family home. To me, it was the place where my own daughter had allowed me to be humiliated, where I had been told I was nothing more than an extra mouth. I stopped in front of the building and whispered into the night, "You took away my home. You made me feel worthless. But you have no idea what's coming." Because as fate would have it, the building wasn't just any building. It was one of the properties listed under the trust. My father, whoever he truly was, had left me not only money, but ownership. And this place, Amanda and Chad's home, was one of them. The day the papers were signed, I held the deed in my hands. My pulse thundered. My daughter and her husband thought they had rid themselves of me, thought they had silenced me. Instead, I now held the keys to their future. But revenge is a complicated thing. As I stared at the document, I asked myself, was I doing this to survive or to hurt them the way they had hurt me? Maybe it was both. All I knew was that for the first time since my husband's death, I felt powerful. And I was ready to use that power. I didn't announce myself as the new owner. I learned to move in silence because silence had been my prison, and now it could be my power. Through a small LLC that carried my initials like a secret, I took meetings with the property manager, read every line of every lease, learned the rhythms of the building, the way I used to learn the rhythms of my family, what broke first, what hummed along, where the mold gathered, and where the light fell soft and merciful across tired walls. I signed off on basic repairs, exterior paint, a touch of landscaping, the kind of small visible changes that say a place is being seen again. And then I issued the rent reassessments. Not out of spite, I told myself, but out of a dry, clinical thing called market rate, the same language that had once dismissed me as an extra mouth. Numbers are cold until you remember they're attached to breath. The notice went out on a Monday. By Wednesday, I felt the tremor carry through the building. The office line filled with complaints, some furious, some fearful. Most tenants were fine, even thankful for the fixes we'd begun. A few negotiated, and I met them where I could because I wanted this place to lift people, not grind them down. And then there was the one call I knew was coming even before the property manager said his name, Chad. His email came first, chopped sentences, misspelled fury threats that clung to the edges of legality. I read it twice the way you read a storm warning. Then I forwarded it to the manager with one line respond with the standard clause, no exceptions. 2 days later, I walked past the building just after sunset. From the sidewalk, I could see their window, the one that faced the parking lot where I once stood shivering with 2 suitcases and no plan. The lights were on. Amanda's shadow crossed the blinds in small, restless loops. A darker shape, Chad paced, stopped, started again. I felt a pull, the old mother instinct that wants to knock, to step in, to fix. I gripped the strap of my bag until the leather bit my palm and kept walking. Once you've learned the cost of softening at the wrong moment, you learn to carry your softness like a jewel you only take out when the room is safe. Days became a quiet chess game. I approved camera upgrades in the lobby, had the mailboxes replaced, so no one's letters sat broken-backed and open to anyone with idle hands. I scheduled a mandatory inspection. The property manager filed the notice with bland professionalism. Chad responded with fire, accusing us of harassment, of targeting, of personal vendettas he couldn't possibly prove because he didn't know where to point his rage. He demanded to meet the owner. I stayed hidden. I needed him to feel what I had felt, that sickening sensation of shouting into a hallway and hearing only your own voice bounce back. I saw Amanda at the grocery store one afternoon across from a display of bruised apples. She had always chosen carefully held fruit up to the light, like she was reading it for secrets. That day, her hands hovered, then fell. Her cart was half empty: eggs, rice, a can of soup with a dented rim. She looked older than 32. Loss does that, presses years into your skin when no one's looking. I stayed in the next aisle listening to the papery sound of her breath. I wanted to step forward so badly, I had to brace myself against the shelf. But I didn't. Not yet. A mother's rescue is a precious currency. Spend it too soon and you teach the wrong lesson. The first inspection happened on a Tuesday. I walked the corridors with the team clipboard in hand, anonymous, in a charcoal blazer and flats that didn't squeak. We fixed a humming light, annotated a leak by the stairwell, marked 2 units for follow-up pest control. When we reached Amanda and Chad's door, the air shifted. You can feel anger through wood the way you can feel thunder through a closed window. The property manager knocked. There was a pause long enough to grow doubt, then the latch clicked. Amanda opened the door. She looked at the clipboard, at the manager, at the staff behind him, and then at me without recognition. I stood one person back, eyes lowered. Chad's voice floated from the kitchen, sharp as a snapped twig. Tell them to come back with a warrant. The manager explained calmly this wasn't police, it was maintenance. Amanda stepped aside. We walked through the unit, noting cracked tiles, a fraying cord, the ghost of mildew on a bathroom wall. I didn't look at family pictures. I didn't look at the sink where I'd once washed plates after cooking his favorite dinner. I looked at the checklist and kept my hands from shaking. That night, a voicemail from Amanda landed on my old number, the one she hadn't used in months. Mom, something weird is happening with the building. Rent. Inspections. He's not taking it well. Can we talk? Her voice did that small collapsing thing it did when she was little and trying not to cry. I let the message sit like a leaf on water. For years I had been the one to chase, to soothe, to tuck truth behind my back, so the day could pass without a fight. No more. Consequences teach where comfort cannot. I set a tenant meeting for the following week, renovation updates Q&A, a few bullet points about safety and schedules. The notice named my company, not me. I arrived 10 minutes early and stood at the back, tucked into a corner where I could see the door. Tenants filtered in: a nurse with tired eyes, a college kid with a backpack that had seen better days, an elderly man who nodded at everyone like he'd been appointed the building's greeter years ago. Then Chad swept in, jaw tight, Amanda behind him with her hands clasped the way she used to do at school recitals when she was too nervous to remember the first line. He didn't look at the room, he looked for a target. The property manager began his presentation: timelines, estimates, photos of planned improvements. People asked normal human questions. How loud will the work be? Will the stairs be closed? Can someone please fix the buzzer that sticks? Then the manager said, "The owner is here and happy to answer questions." I felt the heart rattle of 100 knights press up my throat. I stepped forward. "My name is Margaret," I said, voice even. "I own this building." You could hear the meeting inhale. Chad's chair scraped back a harsh animal sound. He stared at me as if I'd peeled off a mask and revealed a monster. Amanda's mouth parted, then closed, then opened again without a sound. I kept my eyes on the room, not on him, not on her. "I know change is hard," I went on. "I also know what it is to feel powerless in a place that's supposed to feel like home. My commitment is to make this building safer, better, and fair. I'll take questions one by one." Hands went up. It was almost ordinary. The buzzer would be replaced. The insulation crew had a schedule. The landscaping wouldn't remove the little garden someone's grandmother started by the back steps. Ordinary until the crowd thinned and he came. "You," he hissed, stopping too close. "You did this." "Market assessments did this," I answered quietly. "I am enforcing them equally." I let a beat pass, then added, "And I remember everything." His face changed. Not rage, fear disguised as it. Fear of a woman he had miscalculated. Fear of a mirror he didn't want to look into. He opened his mouth, but a voice behind him broke the line of fire. "Chad," Amanda said, soft but firm enough. He spun. She's the owner," she said, eyes on me now, not him. "And she's my mother." Something tender and dangerous moved through the air then. For a second, I saw the little girl with scraped knees, and the teenager who once slept on my shoulder after midnight movies, and the woman who had helped carry my husband's ashes down a church aisle. I saw the long rope between love and loyalty and how easily it can be pulled into a knot. "I'll be available in the office tomorrow from 10 to noon, I told the remaining tenants. "If anyone needs to discuss their lease privately, I'll listen." When I left, the hallway smelled faintly of fresh paint and someone's cinnamon tea. Outside, the evening had turned clear and brittle as glass. I got into my car and sat with my keys in my hand, the engine off, my heart loud. Power didn't feel like fireworks. It felt like the simple right to choose when to speak and when to be silent, to be seen when you decide to stand up, to be safe in a room where someone once tried to erase you. My phone buzzed, a new voicemail. I didn't have to press play to know whose voice waited. I pressed it anyway and let her words fill the dark car, small and breaking and brave. "Mom? Can we start over? I don't know how, but can we try?" Her voice through the voicemail was fragile, uncertain, like a child lost in a store calling for her mother. "Can we start over?" she asked. "I don't know how, but can we try?" I sat in the car, keys cold in my hand, staring at the glow of the building I now owned. Those windows had once been my exile, the glass panes reflecting back my loneliness when I walked away with only 2 suitcases. Now they reflected my silence, my choice. I could press delete and carry on with my revenge, Or I could listen to the crack in her voice, the sound of a daughter realizing she had severed something she never thought could break. The next morning, I didn't call her back, not immediately. I went to the building office, met tenants one by one, listened to their complaints about drafts and plumbing and a dryer that never dried. I gave answers, not promises, action, not excuses. For the first time in months, I felt useful, not in the way of being an extra pair of hands in someone else's house, but in the way of being responsible, accountable. I was building something, myself included. That evening, Amanda appeared in the office doorway. She didn't knock. She stood there, eyes, red-rimmed hands clasped so tightly her knuckles blanched. "Mom," she said, barely a whisper. I looked at her. My daughter, the one who had turned away when Chad called me an extra mouth. The one who watched me pack my life into suitcases and didn't follow me to the curb. My first instinct was to rise to hold her the way I had after her first heartbreak, her first bad grade the night she lost her first pregnancy. But I didn't move. The wounds inside me hadn't knit themselves together yet. She stepped closer. "I was wrong. I let him." Her voice cracked. "I let him tell me who you were, and I believed him. I told myself it was easier, that I had to keep the peace in my marriage. But I know what I did. I threw you away." The air between us pulsed with years of love and months of betrayal. I thought of the motel room, the peeling wallpaper, the shame that clung to me like a second skin. I thought of Chad's sneer, the word freeloader spat like poison, and I thought of Amanda's silence, how it had cut deeper than his cruelty. I folded my hands on the desk. "Do you know what it feels like?" I asked softly, "to stand outside the life you built, holding everything you own in 2 suitcases while your child looks away?" Tears spilled down her cheeks. "Yes, because I see it every time I close my eyes." I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to. But forgiveness isn't a key you hand over the first time someone knocks. It's a door that takes time and effort and the courage to face what lies inside. "You can't undo what happened," I said. "You can't unsay those words or unleave me standing there. But you can decide what you do now. And so can I." Her shoulders shook. "Please, I don't want to lose you." Behind her in the hallway, Chad appeared. His jaw was tight, his eyes burning with the same resentment as always. He started forward, but Amanda raised a hand to stop him. For once, her voice didn't tremble. "Not now, Chad." He glared at me like I was an enemy invader. "You think owning this building makes you better than us? You think money erases what you've always been, a burden?" Amanda turned to him, her voice breaking but firm. "Stop." He scoffed, storming down the hall, leaving the faint stench of cheap cologne and arrogance behind. For the first time, Amanda didn't follow. She stayed, with me. I exhaled slowly, feeling both victory and sorrow coil inside me. Because revenge tastes sweet, but reconciliation is a different kind of hunger, one that gnaws at you in the quiet. "I can't promise to forgive you today," I told her. "But I can promise to listen, to see if you mean what you say. That's all I have to give right now." Amanda nodded, tears running freely. "That's more than I deserve." When she left, the office was quiet again. I closed my eyes, leaning back in the chair, feeling the strange weight of power and love pressing against each other in my chest. I had set out to punish her, to teach her what it felt like to be powerless. But now, holding the deed to her home and the echo of her plea, I realized the lesson wasn't hers alone. Because family, I was learning, is never just love or blood or betrayal. It's all of it, woven tight, jagged and beautiful, impossible to separate. The story wasn't over yet, but for the first time I saw a path forward, not only through revenge, but through the possibility of something harder, something braver, redemption. The night after Amanda came to me in tears, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, hearing her words over and over again, "I don't want to lose you." They pierced me in a way Chad's cruelty never could, because his venom had always been expected. Hers had not. A daughter's silence is sharper than a knife. It cuts you in places you didn't even know could bleed. I rose before dawn, making tea in the quiet of my kitchen, the one I finally called mine again. The steam curled like thoughts too heavy to settle. I wondered if forgiveness was even possible. Was it weakness to consider it, or strength? For weeks I had lived on the fire of vengeance, and it had kept me alive. But fire burns everything in its path, even the hands that tend it. Later that morning, I returned to the building for more inspections. Tenants thanked me for repairs long ignored. Some even brought small gifts, cookies, a thank you card, a scarf knitted in warm red wool. They reminded me that ownership could mean more than control. It could mean responsibility, stewardship, care. When I reached Amanda's floor, the door cracked open. She stood there, hair unbrushed, face pale from nights of restless sleep. "Mom," she whispered, "can I make you coffee?" I hesitated, then nodded. Inside the apartment felt tense, filled with the stale air of unspoken arguments. Chad wasn't home. For that, I silently thanked the universe. Amanda set a chipped mug before me, hands trembling. "I don't expect you to forgive me," she began. "I just need you to understand. Chad, he convinced me we couldn't afford you. He called you a burden so many times I started to believe it. And I thought if I stood up to him, I'd lose him. But in choosing him, I lost you instead." Her words hit with the weight of truth I had waited months to hear. My throat tightened. "You let me pack my bags, Amanda. You let me walk into the night with nowhere to go." Tears pooled in her eyes. "I know, and I will regret that until the day I die." Silence filled the room, broken only by the ticking of a clock on the wall. I could hear the building groaning around us, pipes shifting, life continuing in its messy, ordinary way. Finally, I said, "Regret is easy, change is harder." She nodded, wiping her face. "Then let me prove it. To you, to myself." For weeks after that, I watched her try. She attended tenant meetings, offering to help with translation for neighbors who spoke little English. She volunteered to paint the community room. She even called the elderly man on the second floor Mr. Davis, instead of the dismissive "that old guy." Slowly, she began to act like someone raised by me, not by Chad's contempt. And Chad? The higher rent broke his pride faster than any argument could. He complained, he cursed, he even threatened to move them out. But when he realized no other apartment in the area was cheaper, he sulked into silence. His power over Amanda thinned like smoke in the wind. One night, Amanda came to my office again. She placed an envelope on the desk. "It's my share of the rent this month," she said. "Not Chad's. Mine. Because I don't ever want you to think of me as someone who sees you as a mouth to feed. I want to pull my weight." My heart cracked open at her words. For months I had dreamed of punishing her, of watching her suffer the way I had. But here she was, trying to stitch the wound she had made with trembling hands. I reached across the desk, covering her hand with mine. "Money won't heal what happened, but effort might." Her face softened. "Then I'll keep trying." That night when I returned home, I stood in the kitchen again with my tea, staring at the steam rising into the dark. I realized revenge had given me power, but it was something else that was starting to give me peace, the possibility of rebuilding, of proving that betrayal doesn't have to be the last chapter. I knew things with Amanda would never be the same. The scar was there, visible between us. But scars are proof of survival. They mean the wound closed, that life went on. So when people ask me what happened, how I survived being thrown out, how I ended up owning the very building that once cast me aside, I tell them this: sometimes life forces you into exile to show you your own strength. Sometimes betrayal hands you the keys to your own freedom. And sometimes, just sometimes, revenge opens the door to forgiveness. If my story touched you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And tell me in the comments, have you ever faced betrayal from someone you loved most? I want to hear your story.